Bună ziua! Sunt onorat că am fost invitat la această conferință. Doresc să le mulțumesc organizatorilor conferinței pentru invitație. Regret că nu pot fi prezent. Îmi se scuze că prezentarea mea va fi în limba engleză. And now I will share my screen, and we'll go ahead and get started. So I will be speaking today about CARE, which is an acronym for an approach to operationalizing cultural humility in research with human participants. And just so you can follow along and see where I'm going, I will first distinguish between cultural humility and cultural competence, then identify the critical elements of cultural humility and explain how it can be integrated into research by relying on the CARE framework. So cultural competence has been parlayed as a way to provide knowledge about different groups based on their identifiable or identified characteristics, and allowing individuals to monitor their own biases. And as indicated by the word competence, it offers a promise of mastery. It rests on a number of assumptions that the problem of cultural incompetence is due to ignorance or prejudice, and that information will remedy this, that one can actually master a culture, including a culture of someone else, that culture is static and unchangeable, that it will not lead to stereotypes and responses to stereotypes, that only one factor is important, whether it's race, ethnicity, sex, gender, religion, that diversity is a challenge only between the majority population and minority groups. So for instance, in Romania, one might assume that it would only be a challenge between ethnic Romanians and Roma, when in fact that is not the case. There are many dimensions of diversity between many aspects of the population, that members of an identified group are culturally competent with respect to that particular group. So for instance, that would assume that everyone who is Orthodox is culturally competent and understands everyone else who is Orthodox, regardless of their age, sex, sexual orientation, family background, or life experience. And that one's assumed or projected identity is one's actual identity. But we know that by promoting categorization and labeling, cultural competence does not consider intersectionality. So for instance, in the example that I gave, where we're focusing on Orthodox Romanians, to say that one understands all Orthodox Romanians without looking at issues of age, generational cohort, educational experiences, sex, sexual orientation is simply false, and that knowledge continues to be constructed by the dominant group. So with cultural humility, the basic assumption is that in each and every interaction, there is something we do not know or understand. And so it focuses on developing our ability to engage in self-reflection, self-critique, learning, and transformation. It requires active engagement with others and an exercise of humility in each and every encounter. It recognizes that culture changes over time, that it changes over time at multiple levels, and that changes at each level occur at different rates. So the key elements, and I won't go through all of them that you can see, are active listening, consideration of other perspectives, ethical engagement, flexibility of negotiation, interrogation of one's own biases and assumptions. It is a lifelong process that requires ongoing critical reflection and openness to new ideas. It is other-focused. There is no realignment of power and balance. So by acknowledging that I do not know everything, then it means that I am not approaching someone as if I am an expert, and that in fact they hold the knowledge that I might want to understand. And it requires continuous self-evaluation in order to become more self-aware. And here is just a comparison of cultural competence and cultural humility. We see that cultural competence, learning is transformative, often results in stereotyping, whereas cultural humility requires a realignment of power imbalances, and it is transformative, requiring continual self-reflection. So in the clinical context, in medicine and various other helping professions, there has been an effort to integrate cultural humility into the clinical context. There is the model of the 5 R's, reflection, respect, regard, relevance, and resiliency. This has been proposed in the field of medicine. KIAN, which stands for self-questioning, bidirectional cultural immersion, mutually active listening, and flexible negotiation, has also been proposed for use in the context of medicine, primarily with individuals of Chinese ethnicity, but it is relevant to others as well. And the model known as ORCA, for openness, respect, curiosity, and accountability, was developed in the context of social work. And again, the CARE model will reflect some of this, but is distinct. So we are proposing CARE, which is a new model for operationalizing cultural humility in the context of research. And CARE stands for curiosity, attentiveness, respect and responsiveness, and embodiment. When we talk about curiosity, we know that curiosity is integral to science and scientific research. It recognizes that there is something that remains unknown, and it engages in us a sense of wonder and an acknowledgement of nuance and ambiguity. Attentiveness refers to the state of being awake, alert, and actively paying attention to a stimulus. And the French philosopher Simone Weil said, attention is the rarest and purest form of generosity. We focus on multiple dimensions and the whole simultaneously, and we engage in active listening through verbal and nonverbal behaviors. So we may acknowledge someone's statement verbally, but we may also nod our head, right? And that's a way of acknowledging. Respect reflects Buber's concept of I, thou. It is a willingness to engage with other people as equals and listening to understand rather than listening as we get ready to respond without really listening to the other person. Responsiveness suggests that we are grounded in an ongoing shifting confluence of knowledge, understanding, awareness of self and our own triggers, that we are going to respond to what we hear and see rather than react reflexively, and that we are attuned to the other individual. An embodiment, again, requires attunement to the other person and to ourselves. It is inherently relational, involving relationships between persons and between persons and their environments. And we know that our neural systems recreate what others do and feel. So we model other people's behavior or mental states. The development of embodiment requires close attention to our body. What signals is it sending? What am I feeling? Is what I am doing congruent with what I'm feeling? And the development of a sense of embodiment can be developed through practice, through puppetry pedagogy, through drama, and through virtual reality training. So to develop and manifest cultural humility, I suggest remaining centered and remaining in balance, which is SCRIB, and care, curious, attentive, respectful, responsive, and embodied, all of which is significantly easier if we stay centered within ourselves and remain in balance. So as an example, I'll refer to the Cambodian pre-exposure prophylaxis trial, which was designed to test the safety and efficacy of the antiretroviral drug tenofovir. This is an example of where cultural humility was not utilized and where the results were not helpful to anyone. So the question was whether one pill a day was safe for HIV negative people and whether it would prevent HIV. This was the first large-scale clinical trial in Cambodia, and it began in 2003. It was also the first PrEP trial to be canceled in 2004. We should note that in 2005, 3 PrEP trials were canceled, one in Cameroon due to lack of participant education, and in Malawi and Nigeria because of concerns regarding lab procedures and the availability of drug on the open market. So in the Cambodia PrEP trial, the researchers focused on adherence to ethical principles, and they conceived of these rights as universal and believed that they had adhered to all of the principles to the best of their ability. But the community said this is post-colonial bioethics, and the community was concerned with relations. They focused on the unequal relations between the researchers, funders, and regulatory bodies and the participant community. And the trial was conceived of as binary, that foreign investigators were acting on Cambodian sex workers, and the Cambodian collaborators were largely unseen. And the implication for the community was that the well-being of Cambodians was going to be exploited for the benefit of the non-Cambodians. So we have to ask whether cultural humility would have made a difference. But we don't know, because the underlying we don't know whether the researcher or the ethics review committee that reviewed the protocol had implicit assumptions about sex workers or Cambodians. We don't know if the impact or effect of the Women's Agenda for Change refusal to sign the 2003 Anti-Prostitution Pledge, which was required by the US government, went to an issue of identity. We do know that cultural humility would have suggested that there needed to be increased engagement and collaboration with the relevant communities, and that there should have been an increased understanding of and sensitivity to the local context. With the sex workers indicated that they felt that there was no safety net for sex workers and their families if there were adverse events resulting from the trial. So where were they going to get medical care if this clinical trial injured them? There is the history of colonialism to consider. And there was a local portrayal of sex workers as victims in need of rescue or trafficking, rather than understanding that some sex workers were working in that profession as a matter of choice. So I'd like to thank you for your attention. I'm again sorry that I'm not able to do this live, but I am traveling and on a plane as you are watching this. If you have any questions, my email is here, sana.loue@case.edu, and have a wonderful weekend. Thank you. And my book was just published, Diversity, Cultural Humility, and the Helping Professions, Building Bridges Across Difference. So feel free to check it out. Thank you again for your attention, and thank you again to the organizers for inviting me to speak at this conference. It is truly an honor. Thank you.